We had lived in Los Angeles for several years, and I had been working with someone whose family lived just up the street in Rockport. Together, we had produced a script. Jonathan Frakes' career took an unexpected turn after he played Commander Riker in Star Trek. He was immediately banned by Hollywood after his film Thunderbirds failed in 2004. Studios ceased funding. He had to liquidate his belongings. In order to keep things moving, his wife launched a store. For almost 20 years, he vanished from the big screen and dubbed it Movie Jail. However, the reality of what transpired afterward exposes a comeback tale that Hollywood attempted to hide. On August 19, 1952, Jonathan Frakes was born in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, in a modest hospital. All of the children were born in Bellefonte, but his parents resided at State College. Because Bellefonte had booze stores and State College did not, Jonathan once joked that even professors from Penn State came to see him there, not simply to see the baby. His mother, Doris, was a committed educator, and his father, James, was a well-known English professor. After Jonathan's father was hired at Lehigh University, the family relocated to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, when Jonathan was 5 years old. Jonathan and his younger brother Daniel were raised there. Daniel would tragically die in 1997 from pancreatic cancer. Jonathan received a trombone in 4th grade. It was not his choice. His arms were long. However, a lifelong passion of music was sparked by that haphazard decision. Jonathan quickly became enamored with jazz once his father exposed him to it. He became a member of the Liberty High School Grenadier Band, a prominent group in Bethlehem. They took first place in the field and parade contests when they traveled to Florida for the Festival of States in 1970. Even a public thoroughfare was renamed in their honor by the mayor. Jonathan cherished that moment. He claimed that people came solely to see the band's halftime performances and that they were superior to the football squad. He enrolled at Penn State as a psychology major after high school. That was short-lived. He was ushering at a theatrical festival one summer when a director invited him to participate in a production. Jonathan switched to theater arts as his major right away after noticing how much fun the actors were having. Though it altered his life, he later remarked that a degree in theater might not be the most useful. He joined the Penn State Thespians, performed often, and slept very little, but he liked it. Jonathan attended Harvard for additional training after receiving his BFA in 1974. He enrolled in the professional acting program at the Loeb Drama C Center and worked with actual theatrical groups over the summers. According to him, students may be employed there to complete the cast. He learned a lot from the more seasoned actors and directors around him, and it was a serious job. He had the skills he would need to become a professional thanks to that combination of discipline and practical experience. In 1974, Jonathan Frakes received his Penn State Theater Arts degree. Like hundreds of other aspirational actors, he packed up and relocated to New York City in pursuit of a dream. New York, however, made things difficult. He moved furniture, waited tables, and once suffered a back injury while doing so. He took minor parts with the Impossible Ragtime Theater and even appeared in The Hairy Ape, directed by Eugene O'Neill. He eventually made his Broadway debut in the musical Shenandoah in 1976. However, posing as Captain America for Marvel Comics and making appearances at conventions was one of his more peculiar occupations. Although it wasn't glamorous, it taught him how to handle admirers, a skill that would be useful years later. His first significant break came in 1977. He was cast as Tom Carroll, a Vietnam veteran, in the NBC soap series The Doctors. For a while, he had a consistent salary, but the position was short-lived. His agent advised him to try Los Angeles once his role was written out. He thus packed up and relocated to the West in 1978. Things began to gradually shift at that point. Although he didn't become famous right away, La gave him more TV opportunities. He appeared as a guest star on popular television programs such as The Dukes of Hazzard, Quincy, Me, The Waltons, Fantasy Island, and Charlie's Angels. Even though they weren't major parts, they helped him establish his reputation. One audition at a time, he was proving himself, learning the ropes, and showing up. He was cast in the television film Beach Patrol in 1979. The plan was to use it as a pilot for a new show, but it never materialized. One more dead end. He co-starred with Christy Dial and Robin Strand, while Aaron Spelling and other well-known producers produced the movie, but even they were unable to salvage it. Frakes, like many Hollywood performers, was caught up in the never-picked-up cycle of pilots. The big break still seemed far off, but he continued to work. Then, in 1983, he believed he had finally discovered it. Based on a successful miniseries, NBC put him in the prime-time soap opera Bare Essence. Although there was a great possibility, the show was canceled shortly after it began, since the audience didn't care. It was another setback, but this time it had a positive outcome. He met Jeannie Francis on that set. They didn't click at first. He even made a joke about her hair, but they weren't quite finished with fate. They reconnected on the set of the huge Civil War miniseries North and South in 1985, 2 years later. This time, after 6 months of filming around the southern United States, something snapped. The next significant phase of Frakes' career began along with their relationship. Frakes' portrayal of Stanley Hazard made North and South a smash. At last, people were taking notice of him. Then, 1987 arrived. Encouraged by Jeannie and her family, Frakes went to try out for a new science fiction program. After 7 auditions and 6 weeks, he was eventually cast. On Star Trek: The Next Generation, he was chosen to play Commander William Riker. Everything changed at this point. This was the result of years of hardship, canceled shows, and lost pilots. Additionally, his shooting schedule forced him and Jeannie to postpone their wedding thrice despite their engagement. However, they succeeded. They were married on May 28, 1988, during the first break of the show. Jonathan Frakes, however, was not the most likely choice to portray Commander William Riker in 1987. He had to struggle to get it. Jeffrey Combs, Michael O'Gorand, or Billy Campbell may have been the choice. Star Trek founder Gene Roddenberry stepped in when the studio was leaning towards someone else. Something in Frakes caught his eye, perhaps a bit of himself. He didn't simply support him in silence. He called. Frakes earned the part after he pushed hard. Frakes acknowledged years later that Roddenberry recognized some of himself in Riker. More than a little, perhaps. Frakes unintentionally produced something that became a legend while he was on the show, the Riker maneuver. It was never intended to be a stylish move. The set's chairs were awkwardly low. Therefore, he simply swung his leg over his back rather than sitting normally. Frakes subsequently remarked that it might have appeared to be a move, but supporters thought it was daring, perhaps too bold. It came to pass. With a cry of Riker while mounting a saddle, Jack Quaid even imitated it in the lower decks. Another Riker maneuver, this one more related to battle tactics, may be found in Insurrection. Something unexpected happened when The Best of Both Worlds aired. As Riker, Jonathan Frakes was no longer merely the cool second-in-command. He was confronted by Elizabeth Denny's character, Commander Shelby, who was equally as shrewd. There was a subtle tension throughout their scenes together. Riker gave an eye roll. Shelby exerted more effort. Fans adored it. People were still able to recall the episodes when they were screened in theaters years later. One even shouted, "Read it, girl." That statement wasn't simply amusing when Shelby confronted Riker in the elevator. It demonstrated the strength of their chemistry. The audience sensed it. People began to envision a program in which Shelby was Orker's number one and Orker was the captain. You wondered what may have been. It wasn't merely a storyline development. It revealed a new side of Riker, a man who wasn't sure if he was prepared for the large chair. However, Star Trek was not all somber. At one point, Jonathan Frakes revealed something unexpected. "Gene Roddenberry told me not to smile," he continued. "That was ridiculous," Frakes said. Later, he joked about it. "After casting me, they instructed me not to smile." In actuality, there were a lot of jokes on the set. The actors were boisterous, jovial, and constantly laughing. Brent Spiner, Patrick Stewart, and Frakes also aimed to convey that intensity on screen. They desired that same spark because they liked the classic Bones, Spock, and Kirk trio. They did more than merely deliver lines. They made fun of one another. They gave an eye roll. They enjoyed themselves. And that connection was evident in each episode. It was more than a performance. Their characteristics were infused with genuine camaraderie. Jonathan Frakes could tell the producers didn't take him seriously when he first wanted to direct an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Frakes could see it in the face of the show's executive producer, Rick Berman, who didn't say no. He retained that doubtful expression. Therefore, Frakes stopped using words to push and instead began working. He prepared for months. He participated in casting sessions, sat in editing rooms for around 300 hours, and went to every pre-production meeting he could. Then he arrived with a presentation that was 47 pages long. It had everything. He created character breakdowns, intricate camera setups, and storyboards by hand. The Riker Directive was the moniker given to that paper. And something changed when Berman looked at it at last. Frakes had not merely requested a shot. He created his own chance from the ground up. The Offspring, an emotive tale about Data creating an android daughter, was the first episode he directed. It wasn't simple. Frakes had to balance both directing and performing because he was still portraying Commander Riker. He ran from behind the camera to in front of it, wearing his Starfleet uniform underneath a director's jacket. He put in 18-hour days for scene after scene. It paid off, although he didn't get any sleep. One of the most acclaimed episodes in the entire series, it aired in March 1990. Frakes wasn't happy with his performance in the program even at that point. In fact, he requested that the editors shorten his scenes. He was so intent on the directing side of things. "I like it better, and I'm better at directing than acting," he further stated. However, not everyone immediately trusted him. His co-stars weren't sure how to respond when one of them made the decisions. In public, Patrick Stewart was courteous, but in private, he doubted that an actor could lead other performers. That first morning, Marina Sirtis didn't even meet his gaze. She was concerned that the episode's romance storyline might cause awkwardness. To keep his character safe, Brent Spiner, who portrayed Data, had extra notes ready. But Frakes took care of everything. He was not a rank player. He concentrated on his performance. He observed intently. Stewart had a change of heart at the conclusion of the second day. He was laughing again with Sirtis. Spiner stored his notes. The whole ensemble began to realize that Frakes had done something that none of them had done. This was something he had trained for. They were blind to what he referred to as his stealth directing. He would get to the set 90 minutes early for any scenes in which he played Riker in order to set up every perspective. He had prepared shot lists beforehand. He had discussed everything beforehand with the cinematographer. He secluded himself in the editing bay to go over the tape at lunch while the rest of the crew took breaks. He wasn't asked to do it. He simply did it. In this way, he maintained order without coming across as ostentatious. And Frakes had a special weapon when it came to camera work. He and the show's director of photography, Marvin Rush, would go to the Warp Core, a little pub, once filming had finished. Rush would use bar napkins to teach him cinematography while they sat for hours drinking Macallan 18. Angles, composition, and light placement all took place in between scribbles and beverages. Dozens of those napkins were kept by Frakes. In his office, 13 are still framed. He wasn't Paramount's first pick when they required a director for Star Trek First Contact. Well-known people like John McTiernan and Ridley Scott have previously declined. But no one knows Star Trek as well as Frakes. He was aware of the world, the characters, and the tone. He was so hired by Paramount. After 10 weeks of preparation, Frakes had 12 weeks to shoot. He was accustomed to only 7 days for each phase on television, so this was a significant departure. To prepare, Jaws, Close Encounters, and 2001, A Space Odyssey were among the masterpieces he examined. He even studied the work of Ridley Scott and James Cameron. He was aware of the pressure. This was no longer just television. The invention of the Borg Queen was one significant change. The Borg was initially intended to remain a mindless collective, but Jonathan Dolan, the head of Paramount, insisted that the movie needed a real antagonist, someone who was tangible and with whom the characters could interact. The concept of the Borg Queen was born around that time. It was difficult to cast her. They needed someone intriguing but eerie, menacing but appealing. In Alice Crud, Frakes discovered that. She was a fantastic fit for the job. Hours were spent on her cosmetics. Wires for hair, pale skin, and a strangely long head. The most unforgettable image from the movie is her entrance scene, in which her upper torso is lowered and fastened to her spine. ILM completed that shot in 5 months. In First Contact, everything was more significant than television. Once taking an hour, Borg makeup now takes 5. An additional half-hour was spent getting into costume. Remove it, 90 more. They had less than 20 artists, but they required 50. The intensity of the makeup increased as the movie progressed. More goo, more wires. The Borg appeared to be spilling oil. They were frightening because of it. Craig's body was lowered using a rig for the Queen sequence, and she appeared to be floating thanks to a blue outfit and computer effects. It was a brave move, and it was successful. The initial contact went well. Fans and critics praised it. It was even dubbed the best-looking Star Trek movie by Patrick Stewart. Frakes went on to lead Star Trek Insurrection, but this time things didn't go as planned. The follow-up wasn't as good. There were conflicting reviews. The narrative seems uninteresting. Even Nemesis, which Frakes did not direct, improved on certain aspects of the letdown, according to Stewart, and it began to slow Frakes' progress. Thunderbirds followed in 2004, a blockbuster film with high expectations. It had a well-known brand, a good cast, Ben Kingsley and Bill Paxton, and a respectable budget. However, the movie was a huge failure. It was ripped up by critics. Viewers avoided it. Frakes later claimed that nobody called him back following Thunderbirds. He dubbed it movie jail. He had to make sales. He relocated to Maine after leaving London. In order to keep things moving, his wife launched a store. The reset was difficult. Since then, he hasn't directed a feature film. That was more than 2 decades ago. He didn't give up, though. He returned to his familiar surroundings, including Star Trek and television. In addition to The Librarians, he helmed episodes of more recent Star Trek series. Jonathan Frakes didn't intend to fall in love on a movie set, but as he put it, TV became a place where you can take and nobody notices who directed it. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He was merely attempting to fulfill his duties on the Civil War miniseries North and South in 1985. At the age of 32, he was hardly known. Then Jeannie Francis appeared. She was already well known from her work with Leslie Ann Down and Patrick Sees. It was all professional at first, but something changed while they were filming in Natchez and Charleston. They traveled to New Orleans together on a Memorial Day vacation. At that point, everything made sense. Oddly enough, they had already met. Frakes had believed she was too young to work on the set of a short-lived show called Bare Essence. He was about 30. She was only 20. However, at the time, the timing was incorrect. They were given another chance by the North and South, and this time it worked. She gambled on me somehow. It's still a wonder to Frakes why she would go out with me. On May 28, 1988, they tied the knot. 38 years have passed since then. For Hollywood, that's a lifetime. Jeannie didn't have to be in Star Trek, but she never did. She was already well known in popular culture. She has portrayed Laura Collins on General Hospital since 1977, making appearances in over 890 episodes. She was the larger star when they first met. However, Frakes quickly gained notoriety after joining Star Trek: The Next Generation as Commander Riker. Through it all, they were there for one another. In order to assist her remember those grueling days of filming a soap opera with 30 pages of dialogue, Frakes frequently repeats lines with her. They brought up 2 children. These days, one of them, their daughter Eliza, is acting and writing like them. However, despite all of the accomplishment, Frakes bears a significant loss. In 1997, his brother Daniel passed away due to pancreatic cancer. He was only 41. It took place a week prior to the birth of Frakes' daughter. Daniel was more than a brother. His best friend was him. Together, they had relocated to New York in a beaten-up 1967 Chevy sport van. They had lofty aspirations and small flats in common. Following Daniel's diagnosis, medical professionals attempted a significant surgery known as the Whipple procedure. However, the cancer had become too widespread. They reclosed him. There was no hope, according to the doctors. Perhaps 6 months remain. Pancreatic cancer had a 4% survival rate at the time. Even though Frakes was broken, he didn't let his sorrow fester. He has been fighting for better results and increasing awareness for the past 25 years with PanCAN, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. His objective evolved from a personal to a public one. He formed Trek Against Pancreatic Cancer in 2022 with other Star Trek celebrities. They began walking for a cause alongside John Billingsley, Armin Shimmerman, and 18-year survivor Kitty Swink. They walk in 60 places nationwide as part of the PanCAN Purple Stride fundraising every April 29. The Santa Monica Pier is where Frakes typically begins his. Tens of thousands have been raised by their team for assistance and research. Things are gradually improving as a result of initiatives like these. From 4% to approximately 11% to 12%, the survival rate has gradually increased. Better, but still awful. Over the years, PanCAN has spent $174 million in research. As part of a record $25 million a year, they awarded $10.5 million in research grants in 2022 alone. Frakes is always promoting early detection, particularly if you have a family history of pancreatic cancer. He is aware of how quickly it might happen. He continues to walk, talk, and appear because of this. Jonathan Frakes vanished from the big screen with the 2004 failure of Thunderbirds. About $57 million was lost on the film. It was smashed by critics. It was disregarded by audiences. The film industry ignored him. The director of one of the biggest failures of the 2000s was not someone the studios wanted to risk. The director of short lists silently forgot his name. He was forced to search elsewhere by 2006. He resumed his work as a television director. Not hits, not glitzy shows. He contributed to the Nickelodeon children's series True Jackson VP and Zoe 101. He didn't use a false name, despite some people's suspicions that he might do so out of embarrassment. He continued to use his given name, even for little tasks. He was slowly getting back on his feet. Something changed in 2010. He received a call to direct Castle, Los Angeles, and NCIS episodes. They were both major network programs. The game once again included his name. He had changed from being a box office failure. He was the one who stayed and continued. People began referring to him as the sci-fi fixer at that point. 17 various science fiction or fantasy series that were either having trouble or were simply trying to establish their rhythm have been directed by him. He worked on Orphan Black, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Warehouse 13, The Librarians, and Roswell. They contacted Frakes when plots were a jumble and money were tight. He added organization. He added tempo. He managed to make it work. He had directed more than 100 TV shows by 2016. The whispers began at that moment. He was dubbed the genre whisperer by industry insiders. He wasn't ostentatious. Although he was quiet, he produced outcomes. He was skilled at striking a balance between humor, character, and action in productions that frequently lacked all three. He appeared to be on the verge of a major resurgence when he arrived in 2018. A relaunch of Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, was approved by CBS. Frakes was slated to direct each episode in addition to hosting. The former show's fans were thrilled. The crew was prepared. Then, 3 days prior to production, CBS canceled. As simple as that. Creative differences, they said. It was reminiscent of the past. There had also been issues with the first edition of Beyond Belief. Fox continued to rearrange its programming slots. It took a 2-year break before being canceled. Now, before the reset even began, it was also dead. Frakes, however, persisted. He revived the show in Germany in 2021. X Factor Das Unbare was the name of it. Filming took place in Los Angeles. Once more, he served as host. The bizarre stories and the calm voice asking viewers to determine what was true were the same, despite the country and network changes.